environment are never the violent options. We will judge all of the actions that are taken in order to protect the environment as how effective they are, and we will show that they are never the violent ones. First of all, we believe that to be effective in protecting the environment, you need to be effective in supporting the long-term environmental movement. So, yes, if you blow up a factory in the short term and that stops a few CO2 emissions, if you hurt the environmental movement, no thank you, Logan. In the long term, then you're hurting the environment as a whole. Yeah. Now, moving first to the Prime Minister's speech here. He started by really supporting human rights, which is great. I love that. I'm from the country that invented freedom. Yet somehow he then goes on to talk about assassination and war. And so I'm going to go through this point by point. First of all, he talks about a just cause. Now, he mentioned war, though he never really went into that option most. Though this was actually the most appalling part of the Prime Minister's speech to me. He's talking about just war. Now, he never described that term or explained that term, but thinking of it just in terms of the environment. First of all, if you're going to go to war, that's going to make your country or whatever agent, we never quite got that, not look exactly good on behalf of the environment, especially because the environment, war is the worst possible political action you could take for the environment in terms of emissions from building weapons, from building tanks, from actually flying planes. It is the most environmentally harmful action a government can take. So when on Earth is a war going to be just on behalf of the environment? And certainly not on behalf of human rights, if we're taking it in the frame of the environment. Then he gave this example about the Shell Corporation. No, thank you. He said that the Shell Corporation is polluting in Nigeria and it hurts the indigenous peoples. There's this impact of the indigenous peoples. Yes, Sharma.
So in the face of a recalcitrance of these companies, what are they supposed to do? Hug trees?
They're supposed to protest. They're supposed to argue for laws and regulations, set lawsuits, make media campaigns. No, thank you, Andre. So this idea of the Shell Corporation says that they're polluting. Okay, now we never actually gave an example of what we should do. Blow up the factory? Like, that's going to help? Like, that's not going to make environmentalists look terrible in the future? My point here is that there's not that much of a positive effect of stopping one factory or one oil company from polluting in the short term, when that company could then go back and sue the people who perpetrated this action, and this company would be made to look better. No, thank you, Anna. Now, next he talked about which violence will take. Sabotage, just addressed that, taking over factories. I'd say that's a similar issue as the Shell Corporation. Then kidnapping, assassination, environmental war. This is all from the team who's in support of human rights. I don't see how this is justified. Now, they said, okay, their point is it's only justified as a last resort, right, which was their third argument. So moving on to this, when is it a last resort? I'll tell you right now that the opposition team believes that violence is never the only option when it comes to the environmental movement. And why is that? Now, maybe there is one situation where, we'll take this example of the Shell Corporation, and say that the protests, the media campaigns, the lawsuits, that they don't work. Okay, but even if they don't work, and we have to sacrifice this one little battle in that this one company, this one factory emits, it's not the last resort, because violence is always more harmful to the long-term global environmental movement. Now, to prove that, I'm going to provide two arguments, and my deputy opposition leader is going to provide the third. Before moving on to that, I'll take your question, Andre.
How can you say that violence will be harmful to the global environmental movement when we said that as long as there are peaceful ways admissible, then they should use it?
Well, first, okay, for the second part of the question, because there are always peaceful ways available. And for the first part of the argument, how is it harmful? It's because the violence presented by environmentalists is always going to be overmatched by governments. That's going to be our first argument. Second is that it leads to illegitimacy. And third, Alex is going to show the external effects to the environmental movement the internal effects of the environmental movement when you use violence. Now, first, that violence is overmatched and therefore ineffective. It's a poor strategic choice. Environmentalists, eco-terrorists, have a very small amount of power available to them. But if they're going up against these states, like China, like any state that has a military, they're going to be overmatched. Why would you use this tool that you don't have in your benefit? It's like, for example, all of these other teams challenging us to a debate when they know they're going to get demolished because we're so much better than them. It's ridiculous. No, thank you. It's a poor strategic choice for the movement. Any act of violence can be responded to by a large military, and when we could be using these other tools that I keep mentioning. The second main point is illegitimacy. Social, political, legal illegitimacy. Social is obvious. These groups like PETA, which protects the animals but sabotages factories, they look like crazy people to a lot of people, and they make the vegetarianist movement look illegitimate when really it's not. Whenever a group goes more violent than they are, it just makes them look bad in the world picture. The second is legal. If you are going to do these things that are obviously illegal, this violence is illegal, then you're not going... Yes, violence, assassination, kidnapping, usually illegal act. If you're going to do that, then it makes it much harder to use the power of lawsuits against large corporations when they can be suing you for blowing up their factories or tree spiking and killing the people who are cutting down trees. Third is the political outcome. A government, if you make yourself look bad to a democracy, to an authoritarian regime, either way, the politicians have an excuse to suppress you. So for all of these reasons, and because my teammate has a mustache, I beg you to oppose this motion.
I'd like to thank the leader of the imperialist forces. We call on the second speaker for the opposition. Europe, Anna.
So to start with an insult, as it always happens in a demo debate, I just wanted to say the mustache argument was the best one I heard. So first I want to speak to you about the nature of environmental rights, and I want to speak to you why they are as important as human rights, and you can always say that they are human rights in a sense. I am secondly going to speak to you about state failure, e.g. how it happens that either international actors or national actors fail to protect the environment, and we see that as in case of self-defense, individuals have a right to take action, and I want to draw this analogy and explain why. And last but not least, I'm going to analyse these implications, and I'm going to speak about the deterrence, a word you're going to hear much during the next week because of your MTT topic. So before that, few substantive points of rebuttal. What we've heard was that that when we are going to undermine these, for example, these agents who are going to deal with this problem, we say that this is very minor problem. We firstly heard no substantial analysis why this should happen. We say that the reason why PETA is considered to be ridiculous is because they are advocating animal rights that might seem a bit bizarre to many people, but we say that we are not speaking in cases of animal rights or saying that, all cute fluffy bugs have rights. What we are speaking about is not also these cute fluffy stuff like, well, I want to breathe a bit better air. What we are speaking of is basically a case where a company comes, pollutes your water, and because you're living in Somalia or in any other states that I can come up with that have big state failure, then there is nothing you can do. And we say that it is your inalienable right to drink water because, well, obviously, otherwise you're going to die. Let's speak in case of Zimbabwe, for example. For example, the misdeeds of the government and also the misdeeds of different companies have had people get very, very bad diseases, and I'm sure we can hear from that, perhaps from the second opposition trying to put us wrong, but we're obviously not. So we say that that's just totally irrelevant. We say that even if it is going to undermine these sort of organizations, we say that it is not important, because if we can prevent such a damage, it is a just cause. Now, moving on to this idea of how, sorry, I'm now lost. Yes.